This is That One Audition with Alyshia Ochse.
This is so fun for me. I'm going to start this in a personal place because I want to know how somebody can be so musically inclined and diverse. My daughter is very musically inclined and she keeps picking up different instruments and she can just play it. And that's not from me. I don't know where it's from. I don't know if it was from a past lifetime. So I want to dig into some like musical stuff before, because it feels like to me acting came secondary or an offset spiderweb version of the music.
I remember, I think the first thing that I ever learned to play, and it was by ear, was the Michael Jackson song from Free Willy. We had an old, I swear, we had this old broken down player piano that had just been purposed to just be a regular piano. And I for some reason, watching Free Willy struck me to go into the living room where we had the piano, and I just figured that out really quick. I think I also learned the Young and the Restless theme.
Do you have an auditory sixth sense, essentially? You can hear something and automatically go in and figure it out.
Yeah, that's just basically, that's essentially how every instrument that I know how to play, that's how I went about it.
And we're going to dig into this later, but do you think that you're able to do comedy a little easier because comedy has a musical tone to it? Like you can hear the rhythms in comedy. So do you think that you can naturally do comedy a little bit easier than drama because of this musical ear?
No, I would say that my approach to art, to music, to acting is just coming from a place of truth. Mm-hmm. So I find that making scenes funny is more about being truthful to how either ignorant a person is or how heartbroken he is. And I look at drama the same way. I like to feel what that person or that character that I'm trying to emote from is feeling. It's a very particular feeling. I find that I look at characters and acting and all that stuff as individuals, so that it is like playing it's like jazz. I think all acting is like jazz to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Everybody, any instrument can come in at any time and take it in a different direction, surprise you. Yes.
Yeah, and it enhances. And I'm a very shoot the rehearsal kind of guy. Like when I record music and write it, like I record and write really quickly. I get an idea, I write it, I record it, and it sounds exactly like I look at it like taking a Polaroid, and then that Polaroid was in the room and it was taken. Like that's what that is. So when I go into acting, I look at it the same way. I don't know where it's going to go or how it's supposed to go. I just think there's no better, just different. So I look at it like playing jazz.
Okay, so then I have to know, it's widely informed all over the internet, how you stumble into your first job. But since this is called That One Audition, I have to know that audition story in real time with Almost Famous. And was acting starting to take root for you because you were in a bunch of bands, right? I think you still are.
I've played in a lot of bands over the years. I think at that time, I don't know if I had been in my very first band yet. My very first band was in the 5th grade. This new kid who moved from Jersey to Harford County, where I went to school, he came. I was wearing a Bush t-shirt and he was like, "You like Bush?" And I was like, "Yeah." And he pulled out a Bush wallet. And then I was like, "We're going to start a band," because he wanted to play drums. And I had a drum set that my uncle had given us. So I was like, "We're starting a band." But I think that, I was already playing guitar for a couple of years. I had done some, there was a film called Washington Square that was filmed in Fells Point in Baltimore. And then Beloved was filmed up the way too. These period pieces. And because I had long hair, I was always getting cast in background as a street urchin. And my mom, the first time we did it, it was 110 humidity on the East Coast. And I'm wearing era appropriate wool clothing. And I was sweating profusely. And I was running around. And my mom said, "You didn't complain once." So I thought, she must be having fun. So that just led us from one thing to the next thing as far as acting. And music, it was just, by the time I was 12, by the time I was auditioning for Almost Famous, it was either be Kurt Cobain or play him in a movie. Like I had decided, oh, I want to make movies. I want to be the shark from Jaws. I want to tell the good monologue. I wanted to do it all. I wanted to be as much as a part of storytelling in that fashion as I could, but I wanted to go on tour and I wanted to make records and record guitars in weird glass boxes to try and get weird sounds out of it, stuff like that. But Almost Famous, yeah, that my mother found, I don't even know how she did this, but because it's the mid to late 90s. And she just learned that Variety or LA Weekly used to have open casting calls in the back. Mm-hmm. So we're still in Harford County. And I was watching television. My mom came in and she was like, hey, remember we watched that movie, Jerry Maguire? And I was like, yeah. By that time, I'd probably seen it a couple times. It was on HBO or something frequently. And she said, he's Cameron Crowe, the director of that's making a new movie about music. And I was like, oh, that sounds cool. So she says like, they're looking for a kid. I don't know what it is, but we should film you playing guitar and you should talk about music. And I was like, okay. And we just went in the room and did it. So I played About a Girl by Nirvana. And then I talked about how music was universal, how we can all relate to it, and through it, that even if it's in a different language, you can sense if it's about celebration or if it's about love or about heartache. And then I closed with playing Stairway to Heaven. And my mom it was one of those giant JVC camcorders too. And somehow my mom hit the fade out button. So it fades to white or something. I haven't seen the video in a long time and they kept the original and sent me a copy later on. But it was, when I saw it like a year or two later, I couldn't believe it that she did that. And then we sent it in.
It's very cinematic. Like in the self-tape world, right? We're fade out now because a hard cut, you're like, wait, I'm watching something. It's abrasive. But that fade out, so she invented the fade out. I appreciate her.
Absolutely. She was ahead of her time. That's for sure.
So then it makes him just hire you on the spot, like off of tape. Well, do you have to go in and then do anything for him?
No, the wildest thing about it is like a week or two later, because this is the most in depth about the story as I've been able to tell it a long time. About a week or two later, I wasn't there. My mother and I were probably in New York, and I think auditioning for some sort of Tiger Toys or Off Broadway or something, because we were trying to get a manager, but we were getting things. And my father was at home, and my brother had to go to Little League. And my father was very type A. So we had like indoor cleats, outdoor cleats, practice cleats, game cleats, like that sort of thing. And for some reason, and you had to put things away so you knew where they were when you needed them. For some reason, didn't know where his cleats were. My dad was quite upset about it, trying to tell my brother, this is why we do what we do. He answers the phone and the woman on the other line says, is the star there? And he goes, what? And she goes, is the star there? And he goes, I don't have time for this shit, and hung up the phone. I swear. So we don't even know about this until like later. And I remember hearing like some sort of conversation of my father telling this about they got home from the game or whatever it was. And I don't remember what they talked about, but I remember there was like a sense of just like the air taken out of the room. What was that? Who knows what it was? So a day or two later, they called back and my mother answered the phone. And I heard her in the other room talking to somebody, and she told them I was 12, but I was only 11 at the time. And she was like, oh, okay, I see. And then she came in, she goes, remember we sent that tape to Cameron Crowe? She said, yeah. She says they were interested in you coming out to meet him because he liked you to be like the lead, but the kid has to be 15. So I tried to tell him you were 12, but you're just not old enough. And I was like, oh, that's a bummer. And another day or however much time went by, we got another call and it said Cameron loves John's tape so much he's going to write a role for him. So he wrote this whole scene where I play guitar with Billy Crudup on the drums at the Topeka party scene. And I flew out there and I filmed all this stuff, and he had shown my audition tape to everybody. And so when I got there, everybody knew who I was. And there's a rumor that I remember Cameron telling me this, and I don't know if they've ever talked about it, but Brad Pitt was originally supposed to play the role that Billy Crudup wound up playing, and he was attached to it. And as far as history goes, he saw my tape and he watched it and called a meeting with Cameron Crowe, and he said, I can't do your movie. And Cameron asked why, and he said, this kid's tape, if that's what the movie is supposed to be about, you need to find somebody who's going to allow an audience to watch the movie for what it is. Otherwise, they're just going to go see a Brad Pitt movie. So he left production after watching my tape. And I remember Cameron telling me this at Video Village in a very just, yeah, man, he was going to do that. And I was like, wow, that would have been really cool. And he was like, yeah, but he knew that everyone would have come to see him and not because of what music is supposed to mean to the world. And I was like, that's really cool. And I've never got to meet Brad and talk to him about it and ask him if that was actually true. But that
we
was
got
like
some time. We got some time. We're only like halfway through your career. We're in a marathon, right? Not a sprint. So
yeah,
when you get you get to tell him, wait, so I'm curious, did Cameron want you for the lead and you were too young? So then he wrote this part specifically?
Yeah. Yeah. Technically, that's what he did. I was playing Aaron's little bro. Aaron's the character who says, do you want to see me feed a rat to my snake?
Mm-hmm.
And then a year later, when the film came out, we rented out a small theater in Baltimore and I had a little party and we watched it. And when the credits rolled, it says John Patrick Amedori as himself. So he named, and then it says Aaron Amedori. So he named the characters after that. So my first part is technically a cameo.
It's amazing. That's what it says on IMDb. So I wanted to hear the full story in its entirety. That's a trip. Okay. So to start your career, like I know you were trying to audition, get a manager and stuff, but to have Cameron Crowe give that stamp of approval, you literally end up in one of the biggest movies of all time, still called classic. What does that do to your career at this point? And how are you able to comprehend that as a teenager? Because then you start working.
Yeah, I started, so I'm not sure around that time in which I got a manager, but also around that time in the late 90s, you could freelance with other agents. So I went and had a lot of meetings. So I remember Buckwald would send me out and a couple other agencies. I would get auditions for this, commercials, off-Broadway. We were starting to get the sense that there was a lot of stuff for kids in my age group that were booking that were already in California. Projects would come from California and I could put myself on tape, but they would still hire like local kids. Right after that, I booked Unbreakable, which was another wild story as far as auditioning goes.
Let's hear it. That's what this podcast is for.
What this was doing for me was like, I just thought like, that's how life is. And this was how I thought acting and careers went from Almost Famous on for a very long time. But then I got an audition for M. Night Shyamalan's second, I think it might have been his third feature, but his second largest film since Sixth Sense. And I went in and it was a bunch of kids and I didn't know what I was supposed to be doing. There was no script. I was brought into a room with 6 other children and we sat at a table and then there was a camera and a chair sitting on the other side. And the casting director, Mike Levin, I think his name is. Mm-hmm. Yeah, he said, so he sits us down and explains to us, you're kidnapped kids. You don't know where your family is. You don't know your mother's been beaten. You've been hearing crashes. You haven't eaten. You're miserable. You're scared, all this stuff and like building it. And for some reason, my instinct was to just immediately start internalizing that. I'm like 13 years old. My instincts were to immediately start feeling that. And I think he took one kid up there first and talked him through it. You hear footsteps, the door opens. Is it going to be the guy? It's not. He tells you to be quiet and then he leaves. And then you hear a scuffle and you think it's the bad guy. He comes in, but it is the hero and he saves you and finally unties you. So that's essentially what the scene in the film was too. As soon as I got in the chair, and I think I was like second or third kid, as soon as he said action, I started immediately bawling, just crying and hyperventilating and just going through the emotions as he directed me through it like a silent movie. Just, you hear something over there to your left and there's something upstairs and now it's over here and just feeling fear. And that's how I got that job. And he had told my manager at the time, because I didn't have an agent, that was one of the best auditions he had seen, adult or child. And so those kind of combinations of things. Well,
and just for the audience that aren't looking at your IMDb, they're back to back. Like they're back to back bookings. Not that there wasn't other auditions and stuff in there, but they're the same. They come out the same year. They're pretty close to each other in timing. So I want to know, one, did you have any technique that you were working on, or just pure instincts to even in the moment of go for the hostage scene, you're immediately so transported? Or do you think it's an untouched essence that brought you to that? Now, 25 years in, can you drop in and do an audition like that? Is that instinct still there, or part of the business and the pressure or the idea of what this means sits on top of our bodies on our instruments sometimes?
Yeah, that's interesting. I would probably say, even in some of the work that I've done recently, I'm generally, if we want to talk about the difference between some of the more auditions that have happened when I was younger to now, I'm usually like one of the last people to audition before I book the job. And I know that sounds, oh yeah, of course, like you're like that, but no, they've been looking for a guy for a couple of months. They haven't found him. They've read what other men have, or boys have read with the lead, and they just can't find it. And then finally they bring me in and I book it within a week. And it's like I audition on a Tuesday, I have it by Friday, I'm shooting the next in a week or two. And I really don't have a lot of time to like prep or do that. So at this point, I'm still very much relying on my instincts when those sorts of things happen. Three Women was a very quick process. I got 2 scenes out of context and I just threw one take each of each scene, threw it out there. I mispronounced my name in the slate. I just went with my instincts. That was a Tuesday. They watched it Wednesday. They called me Thursday. I read with Shailene over Zoom on Friday, and I had it that afternoon. And Dear White People was the same way too.
That I had to know Dear White People, because that's where I discovered you, because Logan did the podcast years ago. I was obsessed with the show even before. And in my world, because at this point you're a grown up, I didn't recognize you from some of the earlier work. So I was like, where did this guy come from? Which is why this podcast also exists, right? You always think, oh, that was an overnight success. Where did he come from? Oh, no, been working for 20 years. And then you're like, oh, wow, interesting. I know we're jumping around, but I want to hear the Dear White People audition.
The Dear White People audition. So when was this? 2016. And for some reason I was getting like one of my second iPhone. But I remember like that entire weekend, I didn't have a phone. So I was checking my email periodically, but like it was the weekend. I wasn't really looking too hard. And I, to this day, still have a landline. So I was like, if anybody needs to call me, they'll call me on the landline. So it's Monday, I think. And on my phone, it was taking a while to get the phone to transfer information. And maybe I didn't, because I didn't have the cloud set up or some whatever technological illiteracy that I have that I don't understand. And I had got an audition. I got 2 auditions, and one was for Dear White People and the other one was for some other pilot or television show or something. And I had missed the first one, but the second one was at 1:00 and it was like 11:30. And I called and I said, please, can I have this moved till tomorrow? Because if I go in there and Miss Coleman sees me read this scene and I'm unprepared, she'll eat me alive.
Because it was Kim Coleman, right? Kim Coleman.
She will give me no room to breathe if I show up unprepared, and I knew it. So I said, please give me till tomorrow. And they said, okay, you can come in at 7:00 in the morning. And I was like, okay.
Okay, Kim. I love Kim. She's a tough cookie. For anybody that's listening,
she really is
a tough cookie. But 7 a.m.? Really?
So yeah, it was like 7 or 7:15 or something. It was so early where I was like, okay, I'll do it. But it was because she was casting something else that day. And I was the only dude coming in for Dear White People. Like she wasn't going to have another session, I don't think. So she allowed me to come in before she started her other session so that I could get that tape in. So that was Tuesday or Wednesday. And then all of a sudden it's Friday and I'm testing and I'm reading with Logan and there's 7 other guys that are coming and going and we're all reading, and I read with Logan twice and I followed my instincts with that. I went in there and every time the audition scene was me it's from the first episode and she's looking at the editing bay and I tried to make her laugh every time I walked in there. I improv something, and that led to Justin Simeon allowing me to pretty much be the only person to improv out of the cast because he writes very specific and the jokes, and there was a timing and a rhythm to the stuff. But since I brought that with me along with Gabe with my instincts, he allowed me to contribute that throughout the rest of the show.
Okay. So as an actor and anybody that's listening, I have to pick apart this part of the audition process. 2 things. especially Dear White People 2016 you're auditioning. So now you've been auditioning and working for 16 years. I want to know, definitely relying on your instincts, but are you having any sort of technique? Because Dear White People was like you said, a pilot, a kind of new thing out there. When you say instincts, are you somebody that just looks at the sides, looks at the pages, and you're like, yep, okay, know what to do with it, not doing anything? Or are you doing any sort of script analysis after 16 years? It's one thing to get a job, like an Almost Famous or an Unbreakable off instincts. It's another thing to sustain a career. I want to know if you're like the Jennifer Lawrence type where it's no technique, don't even put in a technique on her. All she's been doing is instinct forever and ever, which is great. That's amazing. I want to know what that is and how that doesn't get infiltrated, or if there is some technique that is starting to come in matched with your instincts.
My technique is usually attributed to whatever I identify with the character. So if we use Three Women, for example, the fact that I just threw caution to the wind and it came back at me, that's how Jack is. That's how he is. He is that Yogi Berra quote, when you meet a fork in the road, take it. You just do. So I went into every scene, every script, every word, just going, there's no terms of strategy. You're just doing it. Now, I do find that if I'm playing somebody who is more astute, which is quite rare, but when I'm reading for someone who's more astute, I will take the sides more astutely. I will think a little cerebrally. But there is a balance, and I like to that's as method as I get, with trying to keep some sort of personal trait that I think that is a direct line to the words on the page. But as far as emotions go, yeah, instinct is the way that I follow them.
I love that. People spend a lifetime trying to get, I think, back to their instincts and trusting that. Because I do think, especially for a pilot, they're hiring our essence. So that leads me to the second question. I love Kim, worked with Kim a couple of times, but she is a tough casting director. She is an auditory, like sometimes when we used to go into the room, or at least when I would audition for Kim, she would look down. She hears the music. And you coming from a musical background, I'm wondering if this gives you that bravado to improvise. Like you said, they didn't let any other character on Dear White People really improvise. Did you do it in the initial audition with Kim, and then you brought that through the test, or on the test on the day when you're like, there's 7 other dudes, how am I going to distinguish myself?
Yeah, I guess it was. Yeah, I didn't think like I have to separate myself. I have to be different. I've already at this point, I've been reading and doing I've been doing this for a long time. So I think at that point I'd already had if they don't book me, then they were never going to go for me. They were going to go for something else because of their other person's essence. So I never tried at that point. I wasn't looking at like competition in the sense of I have to separate myself. My instincts, there's nobody who's going to think like me. That's the most like kind of athletic mentality that I have about it, is that like, it's like music, like anybody can play a Nirvana song. You can play it, but no one's going to be able to write or play it the way that he did. Mm-hmm. And that's why we are attracted to certain actors, music, paintings, and even why we do watch certain athletes. Like I grew up skateboarding. There are skateboarders that are phenomenal, but some of like my favorite skateboarder was Nate Jones, and he was not like a technically advanced pushing like the envelope skateboarder. He just had amazing flow. They called him Velvet Jones. He had great style. And I just enjoyed watching the shape of his body kickflip or half cab flip down some stairs or over a bench or whatever it was. But I remember thinking that I wanted to get a reaction out of Logan. It was an instinct of I wanted to be on the same plane with her. And if I said something silly at the beginning, because where there's supposed to be some tension between us in the scene, if I can get her to laugh, and we fight through that and we do it, then that's a good sign. But even if she goes, this fucking idiot, that's also great for me, because it means that she listened and was a part of the thing and I was doing it. So I improv'd at the beginning of the scene before it started. It's like, hey, I know you forgot to eat, so I brought you lunch. And then I said something like, I think it's gefilte fish salad. Or something. I was making up like really gross things. And I think one time I was like, I don't know, I found it sitting next to some guy who was sleeping on a bench. Like I just said things just to lighten it up a little bit. Shailene and I would to do a scene, and then we could just run it. We could take that scene for 7 more pages by just being those people listening to each other. So I think I just enjoy doing that. That takes it back to that jazz kind of.
I was just going to say, it's you jazzing, basically.
Yeah, totally.
Okay, full disclosure. I'm 4.5 episodes in to 3 Women. People need to watch this. It's been a long time since I have seen such good television, so skewed in the female point of view. And I hate to say this, but the men are the furniture pieces, which were what we're also used to always being, right? The men are really servicing the story for women to come up and find themselves in their sexuality or figure out where they're becoming liberated. It's been a long time since I've seen a show like that. So I haven't gotten into the meat of your character yet, but I needed to know how much of the show is improv versus scripted, because it's some of the most beautiful work. Look, you're working with some of the best actresses. I love them all. But I want to know, once getting the role, especially in the land of self-tape. So you throw down a self-tape, and then so many actors write in all the time. I just consulted an actor right before this. Very good actor, has worked on 4 shows, but is imploding in the Zoom chemistries, because that's like every test that I've had in the last few years. It's all been Zoom chemistry.
Sure.
So let's take it into that, your Zoom with, because it's not like going in the room with Logan where you can feel her, see her, get a vibe. So how did you handle that Zoom chemistry? And then I want to go into like the business of shooting it. How much was really scripted, improvised?
The TV and film landscape, it's constantly changing, but traditional actor training has largely remained the same.
It's focused on a theater model whose main goal is to help you stretch the expression of your instrument. That's why you can have years of training,
From scene study classes to audition classes.
to even an MFA, and still not be able to book a 2-line co-star.
That's why we created the Bridge for Actors.
A collection of tech, craft, and business online courses to teach you the skills that you need to go from a student of acting
To a working actor.
Yeah.
Sure. Chemistry Zoom was bizarre because it's 2 talking heads in 2 dimensions just talking at each other. She initiated an improv at the end of, I think, our first scene. I think. Anyway, I just remember her initiating to continue the scene. And then I gave her something back. And then she gave me something back. And then we just had a back and forth. And that back and forth allowed us to work and find each other and be like, oh, that's what we're going to take to work with us. I remember, I think Jack's first episode airs tomorrow, and episode 5. And there's a scene in there that I remember, like, that scene went on for so long. And I think I saw a cut of it, and they cut like a lot of the stuff that we were doing out, and they do it for time most of the time. But there's lots of fun stuff to be found when you find another acting partner and you get to bounce off of them like that. So taking those instincts and that kind of vibe into playing Jack, I did get to say this at the end of the read, was that I had admired Shailene for a long time. We'd almost crossed paths. Like, I read for Divergent, and I read for the George Clooney movie that the
Hawaii one. Yeah.
The Descendant. Yeah. So there was multiple things that I had read for over the years and some things that I got close to booking, and then they changed directors, and then they went with a completely different version and stuff like that. I had watched her work on other things for so long, and especially her work on Big Little Lies. She has such an emotional toolbox that she's so easy to go from, oh, this woman's really charming, to now I don't trust this person, and now I'm protective mom, but I'm also young mom. And I'm watching this like nuanced performance. And to me, that only comes from being so trustful within your own toolbox. So I got to say that I admired her for that. And to be able to spend time with her, with somebody who is a veteran, who has worked on $100 million budget films and also smaller independent films, but always bringing some sort of emotional gravitas to these performances. And it's also really great to, this is something I can speak of to the other women that I did get to work with briefly, is that it's really great to be around people who care, who really care about their job. And I find that the best environment to be in. We did our first Zoom table read, and it was the first time I'd seen Betty play Lena. I don't know if DeWanda was in that one, but I remember it was the first time I saw her playing that, and that episode's pretty wild. But it was the first time I got to see her portray that I'm smiling through my tears, giggling away the sadness thing that she does as this character. And it's so heartbreaking and endearing. And it was within the first couple pages, and I went, in my brain, I was like, fuck, yes. Thank God we care. There's a really heavy scene that Shailene and I get to do at the end of this table read and in this episode. And now I know that we're all here to give it and to make each other cry. So I knew that I got to give it my all in that table read.
I think it is your surroundings. And once you've been working for a long time, it is who you're working with. And I think creativity flourishes in collaboration versus constriction. I did a series that was directed completely by women. The two leads were women. And we completed that series. And I just remember being like, it was so easeful the whole time. So then everybody was very robust in their like sharing of their creativity. So then we're constantly playing, and we're playing a game of tennis. And at the end of the day, you're so fulfilled creatively that you can walk away and you're like, I don't even care what they put on the screen. That was just, we were so connected here. And watching Three Women, I got that vibe watching. And that's why I was like, oh, I want to dig into the creation of this. And then even now getting to know your process a little bit, purely a lot on instinct, but you being so musically inclined, your instincts are a little, let's say a little keener, a little sharper, maybe than some others, right? Like your ability, even when you say jazz, right? Jazz, you have to be in connection with everybody else to make it work, right? You can't be playing your own set. That doesn't work. If you're going off instinct, then there's not a technique that you're following for every character. Once you see Betty do that table read and you're working with Shailene, how did you prepare to be on set as Jack so that you could improv for 15 minutes? What is your basis for character development? If script analysis, like you can read a script, it's like you reading music. You're like, I know exactly what I'm going to do with this. Okay, great.
Yeah.
But then on the day, to really inhabit, I'm just curious if there is a character development that allows you to be so free in your jazz.
Yeah. For Jack, it was two things that I would walk into every scene to remind myself to stay in a Jack headspace. Because I tried when I really did try to do this, to do the research. I have a little notebook that I found the other day, and it was me when I first arrived to New York, and I was like writing down like, who are his parents? How long has he been on the road? Does he have friends? Is he just really goofy? Like all these questions that I had. Is he just really sad? Is he making up for something? Does he have a secret? And then I realized that so much of who he is was on the page. And I was just writing out basically what these scenes were, the subtext of the scenes, and he's not really subtext, he's context. There's like in the scene, he says,
I love that.
He's
not subtext, he's context. That's
cool. And that's how I saw him. So I thought he doesn't think in terms of strategy, and he would do anything for Gia. So I thought that Yogi Berra quote, and then I was like, he's Wally. Because Wally travels all around the space to find her, to be with her. And he literally follows her around the United States to be with her, to show how much he loves. It's just, this is it. And there's a purity to him. Now, I've realized that in the past, I did a film that at the time was called Driving Lessons, and I think it's called The Family Tree now. And it had Hope Davis, Dermot Mulroney, Keith Carradine. I have a mohawk. I'm this like punk kid in high school. And I came up with, I know who this guy is. This guy ate only broccoli for dinner and a glass of milk, no matter what his mom made, just to piss his father off. And then just to prove to his father that he had discipline and he could do it, because his dad was always trying to teach him discipline, and he was revolting against that. He was youth in revolt. He was, I can only eat broccoli, and I'll sit here and I will smile through it. That's how dedicated and disciplined I am. Just not about the stuff that you want me to be disciplined about. And that was like an attitude that I carried in. So I do come up with those types of things that are almost backstory. So I started doing that for auditions and having very distinct choices. And to be honest, that's one of the things I do miss about the in-room auditions is the preparation and then the laying it on the table, but also being, like you asked, like being so free to be able to improv. I developed that through auditioning because I think, you go in there with an idea, and if they like your idea and they give you an adjustment and you can do that adjustment, you were likely to book that job, or they were likely to bring you back because you could listen and take that adjustment. I think one of my rules is to never be definitive or into, I have to do it this way. Because I've tried that approach in auditions as well. Hey, I think this guy should be talking fast. And I'm like, I think he's more of a mellow, thoughtful kind of hillbilly guy and not so much of this firecracker. I think he should be stoic during this. And they're like, no, we think he should be this. And I'm like, we disagree.
Right. But I think that you're coming up with a really good point. Like when we used to go into the room and audition, it could still be collaborative and they get to see if you're malleable. Just like when you get on set and you've worked with a lot of great talent, you don't come up with a plan. You're not coming up with a plan of, okay, here's the turn in the scene and I'm going to execute this here. Backstory is one thing. You're free. You're playing jazz. Because then when you work with somebody, depending on who you're working with, they might have a totally different plan. And if you're trying to execute your plan, then the jazz is falling apart. You're not in the same song. It doesn't work. And I think that that's coming from, I think, your foundation of just who you are. Like a lot of actors, I think, have to take a long time to almost learn that, right? Learn the tools of acting, script analysis, and then figure out how to throw it the fuck away because they're so... but I'm going to show you my plan. I'm going to show you my homework. And now it's not working anymore. I'm curious from the business side, likening it to what I just talked about. What do you think you've learned the most from working as a teenager into working into your adult life that has either made the business easier to comprehend or maybe challenging at times?
I think that one of the most challenging things for any actor at any part of their career is the box that the industry tries to place you in.
What box do you think you've been placed in?
Sometimes I've been placed in a lot of, I remember in my late teens, I auditioned for a lot and booked a lot of characters that were in this category called geek chic. Okay. That was a legitimate breakdown characteristic. That was definitely between 2004 to 2010. That was a very specific word usage. I've played a lot of musicians, I guess I played some Stony kind of people. But I think one of my things is I've been fortunate to play a lot of different things. So I don't think that people have really been able to place me as well as maybe you can play somebody as the bad boy or that type of person or whatever it is as a generalization to know, oh, this is the kind of career we can make this person be. And I always wanted my work to speak for myself and not so much of the branding nature that's a part of the business. I was never really good at that. I still find that perspective and individualism is our strongest tool set. It's very hard, I think, and it's been a conscious effort to not belittle myself and my art by comparison. I had the epiphany during Three Women that I'm a successful actor after all that time. That was the first time.
Talk to me about this epiphany. What gave you that epiphany? Because that's another thing I talk about a lot on this podcast is at what point do you say, oh, I'm an actor? 25 years ago when I started, I couldn't say that. I felt like a fraud. And everybody has that moment. I love that yours was on Three Women. Do you mind? Can I dig into that? What gave the epiphany?
Yeah, I was just talking to my father. I was walking on the phone. I was walking on the Poughkeepsie Bridge, I think. And I just remember thinking that I've been able to create a lot of art, but also maintain financially my life based off of my job, which is to act. And I was actually talking to my significant other the other day because I was talking about the difference between being a musician and being an actor. So I've had to have the epiphany again, because I guess I backslid on myself a little bit, because I was like, as a musician, I'm a musician whether I'm employed or not.
Yes.
And you're not an actor unless somebody gives you a job. She really laid it out for me to say, like, that makes me sad. I think that you're an actor all the time. She goes, I love the way that you tell stories. I love the way that your mind works and the way that you look at somebody and then you develop a whole story around them and their day. And that's allowed me to have a lot of empathy for people and things over my life, because I do see people as individuals. And that's a perspective that I have that I take into my acting. So because of my acting life and my personal life and how much they coincide, I am an actor. And I'm a successful one, not based off of whether or not people are tweeting about me, or because I have a billboard out every 4 months, or because I'm dressed like a superhero and I'm selling insurance in another country and they're using my likeness and I don't know about it. That's another part of the industry that exists. But to know that, no, I've been able to contribute to storytelling, and people have cried and people have laughed watching my work. And that's always been my goal, is to affect people the way that I've been affected by the art that I love. And that was the epiphany. They're like, oh, I've done that. I can say that I've done that, and that makes me a success. Even if I don't work for another year, 2, 3, at least I got that. And at some point I'll do it again for somebody. And that's like where my head settled.
Well, that's a nice place to get to. I always quote Bill Esper on this podcast because I think I heard it from him first. It takes 10 years to start really working as an actor. It takes 20 years to make a career. And you had this epiphany around your 20 plus year mark of realizing, oh, wait, I've been doing this for a long time. You worked in so many different spaces. You have so much to contribute. You're a chameleon when you step into these roles, even though that first role is marked as your name. But that, again, it goes back to your instincts and your jazz. And at the end of the day, for pilots, mostly for pilots and television shows, they are writing for you. They're writing for your essence. Dear White People wrote for you. They hired you because of you, not because of some script analysis that you did or something that you put on. And I think acting a lot of the times is getting back to who you are continuously. And that seems like something, I've interviewed so many people that kind of was just already like a core thing that was happening for you. And I'm glad that nobody has stripped that from you in any regard whatsoever, because it's such a joy to watch you work. It truly is.
Wow. That's really nice of you to say. Thank you.
Yeah. Every week that I get to interview somebody, I get to take a deep dive into what they've done. And I don't think a lot of actors get to ever do that for themselves. So I get to sit in a really privileged place of getting to see a whole 20-year evolution of growth, not only as an artist and an actor, but as a human. For you to start your career in your teenage years, and then here you are still sitting here and working, you've had probably 3 chapters of developmental phase, right? Teenage years, 20s, 30s, and you've had different peaks of relevancy. And I always talk about that here. You need to know which mountain you're on. Are you in a development stage or in a relevant stage? And you're going to fluctuate between the two constantly. That's part of understanding the business.
Yeah, that's a really interesting thing too. Yeah, for sure.
And for somebody that does teenage 20s, 30s, and then 40s, 50s, you're going to continue to ride this wave. And it's cool to see that instinct is still just burning so brightly. What is something that you wish you would have known about the business side of this? Because your instincts, your creativity, that rainbow is so vibrant. So what's one thing that you wish you would have known early on in the business part of this, or at any point in the business, that you think would have helped?
The business has a way of deeming certain topics as a negative or making you feel negative. Mm-hmm. I think that's the kind of, if I have an advice that's in the same vein of what we're talking about, is you're not going to know everything. You're not going to know about, even when you first start out and you don't know what sound speeds means. And there are going to be other actors who have been doing it longer who have a condo next to the stage that you're shooting at, but also have a house in Pasadena and Carmel, and they have a place in Vermont, and they've navigated their career in that way. I think for me personally, it is more about the mental toll that has been taken over my career, because that thief of joy of comparison, that you are only an actor or you're worth by your current work. I felt victim to, I'm only as good as my last job, not really my last take. I can't tell, I did this really amazing audition when I read for Larities 15 years ago. Like, nobody really cares. But I can still go, yeah, but I can still sit there and go, I studied, man. And I did. I made someone cry in a room because I put in the work and I didn't get the job. There is a weird headline that keeps on popping up when I see about other actors as they start to get popular, is so almost was this character. And but no, they weren't. We all 400 of us auditioned for Twilight that week. None of us were almost Edward Cullen. I did mix and matches with other actresses. I read with Kat Dennings. I read with Olivia Thirlby and 2 or 3 other actresses. And we all had the same about a chance of not getting it as any other person. I don't know if this would have been good to know or not. And I don't even know if it's helpful for the thing, but I remember watching a podcast kind of recent, not a podcast, but something recently. And I think it was about when the new Spider-Man came out and Andrew Garfield coming back and that sort of thing. They were saying that when he was cast as Spider-Man, they had already knew that they wanted him as soon as they saw Social Network. And I read for Spider-Man and I thought I had a shot, but I didn't have as much of a shot as I could have had if they hadn't already had somebody that they wanted in mind that was attainable and it was what they wanted. I find that stuff to be, I don't know, living in the past, and that woulda, coulda, maybe if it would have. But I find that for me, it's the roles that I've booked found me. There were never anything that they fell on me and I was the right person for the job at that time. My
follow-up to that, which I think part of this business is just that, not taking it personally. And I always say, what's for you will find you. You didn't have to effort for many of the jobs that you have, right? Your instincts, everything was already there. But I want to ask, the last question I want to ask is like the mental part of it. All the jobs that you just said, okay, I was in a mix and match basically for Twilight, or I was doing this because maybe you don't have this chip in your brain, but I think a lot of actors do, where we're results oriented and it's okay, I didn't get Twilight, one of the biggest franchises of the time. Do you have a mental recovery process that you do, or does it not really affect you? Paul Adelstein came on and did a wonderful interview. And he got Grey's Anatomy and he had to turn it down because of a one-day conflict on a movie. And then he didn't work for almost a year. And then Grey's Anatomy comes out. And it's like, are you kidding me? And there's just certain things that are so out of your control. And you're right. If it's not yours, it's not yours. But when you get that close to something, or people are like, I almost got this thing. What is the thing that helps you not get attached to that almost? I think that's a very specific kind of thing that we can talk about is in the auditioning sense, is that 20 years ago, you used to audition for casting producers, directors, then studio, then network. It was a 5-6 step process. And you would have a work session. I guess you train yourself to go into the room with the 3 other people you're auditioning against, mixing, matching with the parents or the boyfriend or whoever it is, and the girlfriend and the husband, like everybody's there to do the thing. And then a casting director comes out and goes, everyone can leave except Jacob and Janet. And you're like, okay. Like, right, awesome. Exactly. And at least in those essence, like you knew, okay, I'm going to go get a burger and I'm going to mope about it for a day. But stranger things have happened. People, you test for things and it comes down between me and you. Gossip Girl was one of those things that they asked me to come in and read for. And I said no, because Penn's going to get it. Because Penn literally said no. Yeah. Penn and I used to test against each other a lot in our later teens, and he wound up booking those roles where the pilot went to series. Penn Badgley got that job. And so when Gossip Girl came around and they said, hey, there's a new pilot called Gossip Girl, and I was like,
Is it? And it was like Warner Brothers before CW. And I was like, oh, that's okay. I'm going to pass on that. And they were like, this is good. It's based off of a book series. It's got to be a big deal. And I was like, Penn's going to get it. And then he did get it. And then the role came up for me like later on, but I was right about that one.
And you actually avoided the like heartache of, okay, I'm going to put 6 hours or even 2 hours effort into this. I'm going to run around town because Gossip Girl also was when we were still going into the room. Yeah. I'm going to effort all of this, knowing damn well it's going to go somewhere else. I love this conviction about you. We're like, no, I'm good.
No, I do. Yeah, no, I do want to point. I want to go back to what you were saying though about the how do you deal with it sort of thing, because what it is, it's very easy to think that you know how something would have gone had you done that. And there are some things that I thought that I really wanted, and then I've never heard of that project ever again. And maybe if they did cast me, maybe it would be something for me, you know, it would be something else, or at least it would have been an experience, but you really don't know what would have happened. And I think that it's really not worth a lot of time thinking about what could have happened had you done that, because Twilight might not have been what it was. I look at it like starting a band, casting something as like a band. The reason why Friends worked the way it did was because they got the perfect band together. And it was able to outlive for on decades. And sometimes projects it was going to be a hit no matter who was going to do it because of the money and the backing and the thing and the other thing. That's a business side to stuff that like I just don't really have a huge interest in. But I try not to. I don't take it personally when I don't book a job, because they are trying to find like my favorite, like my way of saying is like when Nirvana became a band, they had multiple drummers before Dave Grohl. But as soon as Dave Grohl joined, that was the band. That was it. That's how they have that timing. That's the punch. That's the sound. That's the kick that you're really wanting behind Kurt's vocals and the noise. And when they added Pat Smear, and you're like, I didn't think it could get any better. I look at casting like that. So I think more so today in this interview, have I realized how much of like my musical background does influence my outlook on acting and the business. And you got to love it too. You got to love the process.
You have to love the process. Just like when you make music, you love the process. And that's what like, I love being able to connect the dots with people's careers. And sometimes we don't know at the beginning what's fertilizing and what's growing. I love this whole idea of jazz. I love getting to see you in certain roles and see what band you're playing with. So thank you like just for continuing to play for us, for everybody. Thank you for letting me dig into some of the process and just some of how these things came to you, because I think it's really insightful and exciting for people to hear different things and to take away like getting back to their own instincts and their essence and not being result oriented. You can't be result oriented in music. It doesn't move people the same.
Yeah, to me, it's the surprises in life and in art that make it special. It's when you didn't know that the line was going to come out that way, or that when that other person takes an extra pause, that it was going to take your breath out. Like you were expecting them to yell back at you, and instead they hold on to it before, and you're like, oh my God, now it just hits me in a different place. That's the magic within being lucky enough to perform. I've really enjoyed being able to talk about this stuff, because this is the kind of conversations that I do have, in my brain a lot these days.
So glad. Please come back anytime that you're doing something else so we can dig in some more. Three Women, they're releasing it. Is it every Thursday?
Thursday at midnight.
Thursday at midnight. Thursday. Yeah. So Fridays on Stars. You can watch it on Amazon Prime. You can watch it on Hulu if you have a subscription. You can watch it. It's out there because and also start it early enough in your day because it is binge worthy. Like it is just, I couldn't stop. But like I'll watch an episode to do this show and stuff. And then I'll find myself 6 hours later sometimes. And that's what happened with Dear White People. I have to be honest. When I interviewed Logan 2 nights before I was doing her interview, and I was like, what's this show? I stayed up for 2 days and watched the whole thing. So I was excited to chat with you. So thank you for coming and doing the show. Where can everybody find you?
On Instagram. I have an Instagram. I haven't posted on it since 2016, but you can see a video of me playing the drums for my friend Brianna Barbara when we played the Mint And I think there's a picture of Buster Keaton on there.
Amazing. Okay, where can people keep up with you, or they just have to tune in and watch?
I think right now it's just tuning in and watching. I really don't post anything on social media. During the pandemic, I took a step back, and it really took a huge weight off of my shoulders just being around it.
Kind of wonderful. Yeah. Be in creation mode and not in promotion mode. A nice place to be.
To be present as much as possible is the goal.
Yeah.
But thank you so much.
Thank you so much. This was so fun.